we're going to start out with a prayer by the Reverend Awkward.
That's all you need to know.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we come to you. Whenever we bow before you, we recognize and acknowledge you as our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. We live, as always, in challenging times. And so, Lord, we ask that you would be with us. Help us to rise to meet the challenges of this day. And we thank you, Lord, for those who have assembled us here today. We thank you for everyone who is in attendance. And we pray, Lord, that our meeting will be more than just a greeting. But we will be willing and ready to go forward with boldness and courage and conviction to lift our community and bring our nation closer to that more perfect union. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
The president of the Yearlings Club. And first of all, we want to welcome everyone. And first I want to start out saying, welcome to the Yearlings Club. This year we are celebrating 75 years of doing work in the community. So if you don't know, you see out in the foyer, we have a sign. We're going to celebrate 75 years this year. And then October the 17th, we're going to celebrate at our gala if anybody interested in coming. We're going to have a great grand time. 75 years is a long time to be sitting on this corner doing things in the community. And first I want to welcome all our guests, welcome all our panel, and our moderator. And we just want you to thank you for coming out. And if anything with the Yearlings Club can do for you, please reach out. Yes, and now I want to welcome Ms. Gwen Young.
For this forum was put together in a partnership with the Yearlings Club and the Black Women for Political Education. As you all know, we're here to talk about what's happening in our country with respect to redistricting. And we see this as an attempt to dilute the power of African Americans. The Supreme Court has handed the states the green light. In the case of Louisiana versus Calais, they basically held that legislation that would give a second district to African Americans, predominantly African Americans, they held that to be unconstitutional. And at the same time, they said it's okay to gerrymander on a partisan basis. So in rapid succession, southern states have all started to redistrict, so to the benefit of Republicans. So this is why we're here today. We have a very knowledgeable panel who will be discussing where we go from here. And that's where we are. We have a moderator in the likes of our own David Tandy, who is a partner at Denton, Bingham, and Greenbaum. He is our moderator. He will be introducing the panelists. In addition to that, if you all want to ask questions, just raise your hand. We will bring a card to you with the pen so that the panelists may answer your questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator, David T.
We are going to jump right into it. We do want to thank the Yearlings Club, and to state, you see all the gentlemen here. We have our lapel name tags on. Those are members of the Yearlings Club in our community, and we're here to serve. And I think my president wouldn't mind me saying this. If you too would like to become a member of the Yearlings Club, all you have to do is ask one of us to get you a membership form, and we would more than welcome to welcome you in to our fold. So with that being said, the shameless plug being done for the Yearlings Club, we're going to move forward with our program. Where we are right now, as it relates to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, is the question that we're asking is, does it still exist? But in the strongest protections have they been significantly narrowed by the United States Supreme Court. In particular, the court's recent decisions in Louisiana versus Calais, along with earlier decisions such as Shelby County versus Holder and Bronovich versus the Democratic National Committee, have changed the legal landscape in the ways that directly affect voting rights, redistricting, and representation. Our panel tonight brings together leaders with deep experience in the law, public service, and civil rights, faith, and election administration. So let me introduce our panel to you. Senator Gerald Neal represents the 33rd District in the Kentucky State Senate and is the longest serving African American member of the General Assembly. Of course, he spent decades in public service and has been a leading voice on policy and community engagement and brings an important legislative perspective to this conversation. Amber Duke is the executive director of the ACLU of Kentucky and is the first Black woman to lead the organization in its history. She has led major civil liberties and voting regulated advocacy efforts and brings a powerful perspective on litigation, organizing, and constitutional rights. Dr. Raymond Burse, Burse, is the president of the Louisville chapter of the NAACP, and he has had a distinguished career in academia, law, and business, and brings both civil rights leadership and a deep commitment to community advocacy. So again, Dr. Burse, we thank you for being here with us as well. Reverend Dr. I put the doctor on there. I'm gonna go ahead and give that to you. You do have a JD. That's right. That's right. So Reverend L. Clark Williams is the chairman of the People's Campaign and director of ministries at Shiloh Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky, and is a widely respected faith leader, attorney, and voter education advocate. And then finally, we have here with us Rosalind Welch. She served as an election official for more than 10 years and is vice chair of the Louisville Democratic Party. And she gives us the day-to-day and the practical experience in terms of voter election administration. So with that being said, let's give all of our panelists a round of applause. We wanted today to feel kind of like one of those old school kind of like church meetings that we used to have, you know. And so if it feels hot and steamy in here, that's why. The AC is on, but we wanted to bring back the old school effect because indeed the times that we are in right now, it feels like we're going back and we have to fight the civil rights movement 2.0 all over again. So we got to limber up our muscles again. What I want to do just to make sure that all of us are on the same page when we're talking about the Voting Rights Act and kind of how we got here. It wasn't just because of this, the recent case that everybody heard about is Louisiana versus Calais, but it started back with a couple other cases. So let me give you this kind of like just real kind of quick history with the Voting Rights Act, and then we can kind of build on and we're going to grow from there, okay? So Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to enforce the 15th Amendment and to eliminate racial discrimination in voting. There are two provisions that mattered the most in the Voting Rights Act. The first being, you'll hear people talk about Section 2. Well, Section 2, what that did, it prohibited voting practices that denied or abridged the right to vote on the account of somebody's race, okay? Then you had Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which required certain jurisdictions to obtain federal approval before changing the voting rules. That was what you would commonly hear as pre-clearance, right? And they were typically, the states that we're talking about were in the Deep South. So Kentucky was not a part of the Voting Rights Act, particularly I guess as it relates to Section 5, where we had to get our legislature had to get pre-clearance to change any of the voting, precincts, or not precincts, but yeah, we even went down to the precinct level, but any of our voting districts and things like that, okay? So that's what that was. So then over time, the Supreme Court started to narrow those protections. First, in Shelby County versus Holder, the court struck down the coverage formula that determined which jurisdictions had to seek pre-clearance, effectively as disabling Section 5 unless Congress passed a new formula. In the Bronovich versus the Democratic National Committee, the court made it harder to prove vote denial claims under Section 2. And then finally, the most recent case that we've talked about is Louisiana versus Calais, and in that one, the court has confronted the tension between the Section 2 compliance and the Equal Protection Clause in the context of race-conscious redistricting. So with that kind of understanding and what we've been dealing with, let's turn this over to our panel and start getting into some discussions as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. Senator Neal, I want to begin with you and ask for you to discuss what do these decisions mean for Black political power, especially here in Jefferson County and across the Commonwealth of Kentucky?
Right to the heart of it. And the heart of it goes back historically, and that is everything that happened from the 1965 Voter Rights Act, which also included the sections that you're talking about, with them being compromised in Holder, as you've indicated, and with them being compromised ultimately by Louisiana versus Calais. It's said in effect that racial gerrymandering, which they characterize it, cannot be used as if you characterize it the way they're saying it, as the Civil Rights Act allowed. So what that meant basically is that you're going to have a situation where the political piece is going to be dominant in terms of outcomes, in terms of redistricting or forming districts. Now, what does that mean? What that means basically is that race is out. They have gutted, I would say, the Voting Rights Act as it relates to utilization of race in that sense. And the reason is because they are now requiring that you have to show what? Intent. And intent is like one of the most difficult things to show, and particularly since that journey from the early days, they've become very sophisticated, maybe not so sophisticated, but focused enough to understand how to use neutral language in such a way where they can do what they want to do and get around that intent question. So that's key. The other point is, and I want to bring it home a little bit closer, because we think of this sometimes in federal sense, and of course there's impacts there, but the state clearly not being able to use that, it also has implications for the local. And it has a serious implication for the local, because now what they can do is broaden districts, for instance, and compromise or dilute the Black vote with respect to that, or votes of those of color, or targeted populations and so forth. So they can do just about what they want to do. Now, understand that this is not the beginning of this, because after Shelby v. Holder, they have been redistricting at least 23 states that are already redistricted based upon what Holder's impact was. But now you've seen what happened since you understand what's happening since Louisiana v. Calais. Now everybody's rushing, even mid-stride, the 10-year piece where they redistrict, they're just running to their legislatures to make those changes. So this is the real deal. This is serious business right here, and it's going to take a lot, and a long time, and a commitment of everyone to recognize that and get about the work that has to be undertaken. All right.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Ms. Duke, I want to now turn it over to you. I'm going to share my microphone with you on this. From the perspective of civil liberties and voting rights advocacy, how have these cases changed the ability of organizations like yours and others to enforce the Voting Rights Act through the court system?
Thank you all for having me. I mean, I think as Senator Neal said, this really strikes at, when we say it strikes at the heart of the Voting Rights Act, it really takes away, right? It takes away the ability for organizations like the ACLU or NAACP, Urban League, that bring these cases to be able to bring them. I think something, and that's heavy and that's really hard, and when you think about the people who literally died and the blood that was shed in order to pass the Voting Rights Act, and to think where we are today, that is very heavy to sit with. And I also think what Senator Neal was pointing out about the time that it took, right? So like many things that we're seeing rights rollbacks through the Supreme Court, these aren't things that just started with this particular Trump administration or even the one before. opponents of voting rights have been working on this strategy for decades. And so I think that sometimes it's daunting to think about all of the work, as Senator Neal was saying, was going to have to happen. We are dealing with sort of the immediate impacts, what we're seeing in Tennessee, what we saw in Alabama, all of these different states that rushed to go into redistricting and to update these maps and to split up districts to dilute power. We're seeing that happen. Some of our, my colleagues at the ACLU of Alabama, for example, they went into a special session almost immediately. I think it was called within hours of when this decision came down. These state legislatures were ready to take action. Folks in South Carolina, we know that the president himself was calling the leaders of South Carolina and pressuring them to say, you've got to bring this vote, we've got to take this action. The ACLU of Alabama had a short victory, so after Calais, there was a map that was passed. They filed a challenge to those maps. They had a very short victory, I think that maybe lasted 48 to 72 hours, and then it got to the circuit court level, and then it was overturned under the provisions of what came out from the court in Calais. I will say that, what I feel some hope about, it's like one of the legal aspect has been an extremely powerful tool, right, to support people's right to vote. We're going to have to look to some of the other tools now, right? And so South Carolina gives me some hope. This is a state that, again, the president called. There were conversations, there were hearings. They went into a special session to pass new maps, and they ended the session without any new maps that were passed. People mobilized in huge numbers in South Carolina. They showed up at the hearings, they were protesting, and there were questions about whether or not, and clearly they did not have the votes in order to get these new maps passed. And so we celebrate that victory that happened in South Carolina. Of course, the governor put out a statement that said we're going to come back. Right? We're either going to come back in another special session, or we're going to come back in our next General Assembly and try to pass these maps again. So, right, the people have to come back, but I think that we have to look beyond now that the legal tool has just been so degraded as a way to challenge these. It really is going to have to be the people power, the organizing, the showing up, and doing so over the long term in order to make a difference.
Very good.
To Amber's point, when you talk about this, where we are today, it didn't just happen overnight. And it's interesting. I was having this conversation with my daughter earlier today when we were talking to different people and asking, well, is one person MAGA versus a regular, or what we used to call a regular Republican? I said to my daughter, I said, you got to remember, Mitch McConnell used to be, would be considered what is a regular Republican, but with all the work that he did with the judiciary and the Federalist Society to stack courts with conservative-leaning judges, that was a plan over time. Senator Neal will tell you about ALEC, which is a legislative conference that legislators go to. It has a conservative bent. When we talk about the legislation being pre-filed and ready to roll, and you look across the country, you're seeing the same piece of legislation. They just take out Utah and put in California or whatever state.
Yeah.
Groups like that are the ones that are putting that together. So when we're talking about the organization piece, that's what we have to start working on now. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Burse. Would you share with us your thoughts on what are the practical effects that these cases are now having on us in the community?
County, all you got to do is look at Senate Bill 4 and the restructuring of Jefferson County Public Schools to board, reducing the number of board members from 7 to 5. And prior to that reduction, we had at least one minority district. If you look at the numbers now, when I say majority minority, I'm thinking of African Americans being the minority, not the other groups and individuals. So when they go through the numbers that were produced, the argument now is that there is at least 2 majority minority districts. If you consider other minorities in addition to African Americans, if you consider that. My argument is that historically, those groups have never really aligned and voted with African Americans. And therefore, our ability, whereas today we have 3 of the 7 members of the Jefferson County School Board are African American, we could conceivably, after November, have 0. That is the practical impact of that. In addition to that, I can tell you that from the local branch and our national organization is looking at, or at least considering some litigation over that issue. And the more we look at it, as I say, with things that the Supreme Court has done, it's taken away. Section 2, I guess after the Shelby case, in terms of Section 2, we always thought that if we could prove intent, we could get things changed. If we can prove intent. If you look at what the Supreme Court did just last week with the case in Alabama, a federal judge had determined that Alabama has specifically, with intent, drawn districts so as to exclude African American voting, okay? The judge ruled that was in fact the case. It was there. Supreme Court, after the appeals court overturned, the Supreme Court said, that's fine, let's go. So what they have done now is legalize, in my opinion, discrimination against African Americans. And so what it means now is that in local areas like Louisville, these things occur. One of Gerald's colleagues in the General Assembly tried, I guess, at least it's gone publicly saying, well, we need to come to Jefferson County and we need to redraw the 3rd congressional district. So, it is a snowball that is rolling. And in fact, until we as people do something different, they're going to continue to do it. And the most powerful thing that we have, is our vote. And somehow, one way or the other, we've got to learn to use our vote. I'll give you one statistic from the last general election for the President of the United States. The precinct in which our NAACP office sits, there are 212 registered voters. 212. 6 voted in the election. That's how bad it is. And so until we as a group decide we're going to do something, they got to pass the green to do whatever they want to do.
Please.
I want to double down on that last comment that was made to show, to indicate how tough this is. One of the political cycles that I had running for office, I had no opposition whatsoever. So what I did was I organized around 4 precincts where there was nothing coming out of those precincts with the idea of targeting them and encouraging those people who did not vote to vote. I had my whole team there. That's the only place we went. And we did that the whole campaign. And we were met with open arms, smiles, and great people, etc. Except when the vote came out, less people voted in those precincts.
Wow.
You talked about something that was depressing. It was extremely depressing. The reason why I'm raising this is something else that was said here. We're going to have to do something different. We can't do the same old thing and get the same result. And that means we have to what? Come together, analyze that, and create our pathway.
I'm going to kind of move just a little bit more as we're talking about and kind of shift our focus a little bit more on Calais specifically and our redistricting question. And then for Clark and Roz, I'm coming to you, but we're still kind of in the wheelhouse of our first 3 panelists so far. So I want to kind of keep that going. Let me come back to Miss Duke. Or is it all right? Can I call you Amber? Is that all right? Okay. I want to be respectful. Amber, do you believe that litigation remains a reliable tool for challenging discriminatory maps after Calais? And if so, what kinds of claims do you think will be the strongest for it?
That's a good question. I think some of that is under discussion, right? I think at least within the ACLU, we're still, quite honestly, reeling a little bit from this. I think we're always trying to think about novel litigation strategies. So I don't know what those look like at this early point. I can say, I'm thinking about when Roe was overturned at the Supreme Court, right? And there was just this huge shift in the ability for, challenges to these, to anti-abortion laws to happen in the same way. So, for example, when we were challenging things here in Kentucky, we were doing it, through federal protections. Once those went away, we had to turn to a state level litigation strategy. We're still, working on that. The Kentucky Supreme Court has given us some new barriers as to who can bring those kinds of challenges. But I think that it opens up conversations. When one door is sort of closed, what can happen at the state level potentially? Of course, that's going to vary from state to state. As was stated earlier, the redrawing of districts not only has an impact on federal races, right, but it's going to have an impact on what is happening locally. Are there ways that these things can be challenged at the local level? So I don't know what those answers are, but I think that there are a lot of really smart people who are trying to figure out what those creative new strategies might be.
And everybody understood that part too about when she was talking about there's the federal way of attacking, and then there's the state level of attacking, and the reason being for that is because sometimes, it's similar to the way that we do things actually for the city of Louisville, right? Or let's say like if the legislature wants to, they don't speak on a particular area of law. There's nothing, or even if they speak on a particular area of law, and we as a local community wanted to do something stronger, unless the legislature preempts us from doing that, we can have an even stronger law than what they would have, right? So like, give you a prime example, like one time we here in Louisville, we wanted to pass a minimum wage standard and set it, make it higher than what the federal was, okay? It wasn't, we passed that. It wasn't until the legislature came in and then voted saying that localities could not do that, and they took that away. So I think there's a number of different ways that we can attack things here. Now, Senator Neal, as it relates to our lawmakers, how are they thinking, or what are you hearing from your colleagues as it relates to the tension when it comes to redrawing district lines here in Kentucky? Will we see that coming down the pipe in the Commonwealth?
Question in my mind that there is a very strategic, persistent, and calculated attempt by the party other than the one that I represent wants to take over, let's say for instance, Jefferson County, Louisville as we know it, because they have not been able to do it otherwise. The Metro Council has been structured in such a way that gives them more leverage, more political leverage in that framework, I would argue. If you look at what they're doing with other institutions like JCPS, I think that's a clear example of what Dr. Burse, I'm gonna call you Raymond, right? What Raymond was talking about with respect to that, that's a very intentional piece to shift leverage to a centralized position so that it can be controlled more from Frankfurt in terms of policy that's put forward. And I'm talking about some action that we already took that will become legal, effective, July 15th, I believe. So, and I could go on and on with institutions, going back to revisit to merger, that whole piece to where funds were calculated to serve the interests of those so they wouldn't be compromised by the merger, maintaining that central core. Now they're trying to shift money out of there, out to the east, in areas that they had not, was not contemplated to happen with respect to merger. I go on and on and on. Here's my point. My point is there's an intentional attempt. Don't be naive about this. It's an intentional attempt for the other party, also known as the Republican Party, in Kentucky to take over through individuals or by compromising individuals and or by gaining leverages that will enable them to get the results they want and benefit from their relationship with Jefferson County. Jefferson County, Metro Louisville is the most powerful element of the political construct in the Commonwealth, and they want it. So, to answer your question succinctly, yes, they will do whatever's necessary.
Let me add a couple of things to what Gerald said. I want you to Republicans, and we're supposed to be nonpartisan, are working to a playbook. They never been able to control Jefferson County. So what local legislators from Jefferson County couldn't get done, they requested the state legislature to do, and they have responded. For the upcoming election cycles, Metro Council Republicans have targeted 3 districts. 3 districts. And if they get those 3, they will control Metro Council. And if they control Metro Council, the Inspector General, the community commitment, all of those things will disappear. And so, it is a planned strategy to, in fact, do things that to the benefit of many of the folks who don't necessarily look like us.
Did you want to add something to that? Go ahead.
Okay. So, to piggyback off of those statements, is that not only is that possible, but Metro Council redistricts itself within its body every 10 years. So the actual authority of redistricting is within that body. So to lose the Democratic majority of there causes that to go, okay, we can redistrict all of Metro Council. So where you believe that you live in District 1 now, District 1 may go east to west instead of north to south, right? So because the other part to it is, remember, Jefferson County, a lot of our districts were built off of the application of the Voting Rights Act. So you have these majority-minority districts, right? So you have District 2 in the middle of Newburgh, heart of Newburgh, right? Right now, that is House District 30 sits there. House District 30 is the most diverse House district in the entire state. The entire state. That same level of input, they don't put up Republicans for that seat because it's districted in a way that it consolidates that power. Same with 2. But if they redraw their lines, now even within your Metro Council districts, it looks very different from the way in which power is consolidated even here on the local level, right? So when you talk about, I remember years ago, we talked about what black political power looks like even within Metro Council. And there is this commonality of the merger, and I will say this is a Republican mentality that has been put in here, that the merger has diluted black power within the city. And so people go, well, let's reverse the merger so we can have black political power back. Except for the fact that your business income, your structure income, has moved to small cities that are not within Metro without a merger, right? So now you lose income places that you would have otherwise. Same with JCPS. If they split JCPS district, then we're looking at, if JCPS is predominantly funded by property values, then we know that if JCPS is split into 3 different districts, their budgets would then be determined based on the property values in those districts. You're going to have vastly different districts in this city. So it is, even though we say, oh, it just happened with VRA, this is what's going on here, but the reality of it is that it is so much more local than we think, especially when you talk about, okay, is this my person who I'll call for XYZ? Is this who I need to get my street cleaned? Well, now this person can live on the other completely different side of the city because they can redistrict it in totality. And so that's where we talk about how this applies directly here and how that will be felt with a Republican sweep in November for Metro Council. And so they're running people who speak to some of the issues that we've had within our communities to make it seem like they're on your side. They are not. Regardless of what they tell you at the door, they will get inside of the room and they will be a part of the Republican caucus. And whereas I love Democrats because I'm a proud Democrat, I also know that we are the group of individuals. So we don't always walk out of the room on the same page. But I promise you, I would rather be in a room where we all can have our own opinions than for us to placate to a tyrant any day. And that's the reality of where we are within the party structure and within where we're heading within the city.
Are nonpartisan. Okay. One thing I will point out to everyone: look at nonpartisan races and how they are utilized, particularly as it relates to African American voting power. Okay, because when they can't beat us at the ballot box, based on partisan measures, then they go and say, "Oh, well, let's make it nonpartisan." I just point you to Georgia, and the legislature there passed a law there where they made the 5 strongest Democratic counties that make up Atlanta Metro, and said, "Oh yeah, well our prosecutor races are going to be nonpartisan." All 5 of those were led by African American women that were Democrats, but now all of a sudden we want to be nonpartisan. And then the thing I'll say this, I'll get off my soapbox. If you watch WHS when I'm on there, you will hear me say it all the time and point out the hypocrisy that they make the council races nonpartisan, but you still have to caucus as a partisan. That makes no sense, right? So they kind of like they're telling you what you're doing. But okay, I'm gonna get off my. All right. So Clark, I'm gonna turn it over to you now, from the perspective of faith-based organizing, voter education. How do you think our churches and civic groups should respond now that the Voting Rights Act is being diluted, and how should we be operating going?
I finally got the mic, and I'm a preacher, so I'm going to keep it the rest of the time. It's a pleasure to be here. This is home for me. I don't have my name badge on, but I am a proud Yearlings Club member, and the Yearlings Club is really so special in part because of things like this. This is a place we can come and we can share, we can get information, but not just get information, but to be empowered. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm a member, a proud member of the Yearlings Club. As it relates to faith-based communities, one of the things that faith-based communities that I've been challenging some to do, and will be challenging more as we go further into the summer, every church, every nonprofit organization for that matter, should be vested in these elections. We lost a legislator, one of Senator Neal's colleagues from the State House, previously in Representative Jesse Crenshaw, earlier in the latter part of the spring, I believe last month in May. And one of the things that he shared, I believe it was in April actually, one of the things that he shared with some of us at the Capitol was that the best way to bring about change is by electing people who already agree with you. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about what happens in the courts and what judges will do and what the systems will do, but the best way to bring about change is by electing people who already agree with you about the changes that need to be made. And so it all goes back to voting. And one of the things we're saying to nonprofits is you're not supposed, and churches are not supposed, to tell you who to vote for. However, there are many churches, by the way, now that are doing that on the other side, and nobody's calling them out on it. And in the foreseeable future, they will not be called out on it, and we all know why. Now, having said that, if we're going to continue to comply with the law, because we know justice is not given out even-handed, one of the things that we've done fairly effectively in certain precincts, like many of the ones, like this one and other ones, in Fayette County and other places, there are precincts in this state, like the one we're in now, that really no one votes Republican. If they vote Democrat. And one of the things you need to understand about that is that the bluest precincts in the state are bluer by far than the reddest precincts in the state are red. If you go to the most rural, MAGA part of this state, you will find out when you look at the precinct numbers and the results that there are 10, 15, 20, 30 people that ended up voting for Kamala Harris. They didn't want anybody to know it. They were afraid that somebody might shoot in the house if they knew that they wouldn't put a sign out or anything like that. But at the end of the day, they still ended up voting for Kamala Harris. or they voted for, we'll just stick at the federal level with that. But having said that, one of the things we've been challenging churches and others to do is to adopt the precinct that they're in. You can do a nonpartisan canvas in your precinct. On one, we do these cards through the People's Campaign all the time. On one side of a 6x9 card, you have the issues that are going to be on the ballot based upon the races that are going to be up. You can list the offices that are going to be up. You can list the issues that are going to be on the ballot based upon, the offices that are going to be on the ballot. And you can say when you knock on the door, you ring the doorbell, you say, we're out here at such and such church, and as your neighbor, we're concerned about issue 1, 2, 3, and 4. You name them. Which one of these issues is most important to you? Which one of these issues are you most concerned about? They will give you one of them. You'll make sure they're common type issues. Gas prices can be one of those issues. And then you start a conversation and you say, well, that's why we as your neighbor are out here right now, because we're concerned about these issues as well. It's important that you vote in this election. You flip this card over, you can see the QR code or where you can go to get the information about where to vote. Here's the last day to register to vote if you're not registered. Here is all of the housekeeping information people need. This is when early voting is going to be. These are the locations of early voting. You can put all of that housekeeping stuff on the other side of the card, and guess what? You've stayed within the law. And one of these precincts right near where we are right now, I keep going back to the governor's race, where 403 people voted. 3 of them voted for somebody with a write-in or an independent or something like that, and the other 400 voted for Andy Bashir. Now, the turnout was about 15% below the state average, still, which is not nearly as bad as some of the things that Dr. Burse and Senator Neal were talking about. But the point is, we need to adopt our precincts and even if we're in a fraternity, a sorority, or any other organization where we don't do partisan work, adopt your precinct, canvass it. If you need help with the cards, we will have them. There's a brother here that's also a Yearlings member. I saw Chris Romaine somewhere. He's gone out, and he's canvassed with us before, both with partisan cards and nonpartisan. And it's really effective. It can be done, and it's critical that we do it. It's a shame for us to be talking about voting rights and how we're losing ground in that space, and then at the same time we're not doing everything we could possibly do to get people to vote.
This question to you. We centered this conversation around the Voting Rights Act, but there's a piece of legislation that's actually before Congress now called the SAVE Act, right? I love ways our Republican friends love to say the opposite thing of what they're actually doing in the titles of their legislation. But again, I'll get off my box. But Roz, talk to us about the various barriers now that we're starting to see get put up when it comes to just being able to go and cast your ballot. And what are some of the things you think we ought to do to make sure that we're not going back?
In Kentucky, when we passed the voter ID law, the first thing we talked about was a poll tax, right? You gotta, it's not only do I have to have this ID, but y'all ain't got enough places for me to even get the ID. I gotta wait 70 days to get the ID, right? And so you create this another barrier for admission to vote. In Kentucky, there's an affidavit that you can sign when you go vote if you don't have your ID. So you can still have a personal acquaintance, somebody who works the polls that day, election worker, and say, oh yeah, I know, that's Rachel, or whomever else. And so they can identify you. You just sign an affidavit, say, I know who I am, this is where I live, et cetera, et cetera. With the SAVE Act, you don't have those options. It is, you must have this ID. But not only is it just an ID, it is an ID that requires several layers to prove citizenship, right? And so how many married women do we have in this facility? Raise your hand if you're a married woman. All right. And maybe you changed your name, right? And as we talk about this, the patriarchy, and now we got a new generation that I ain't changed my name. Well, it may be good that you didn't change your name, because now you need 4 more sets of paper when you go in. I was at a conference earlier in March. We actually were in DC with Delta And I stopped by every congressional office and both senator office for Kentucky to talk about the opposition of SAVE and the SAVE Act. And I spoke to the specificness of the fact that Kentuckians are not able to get the documents that you're asking for this legislation that you support. Your constituents in rural Kentucky do not have a certified birth certificate. They have a copy of that birth certificate that's underneath that mattress, right? And I don't know if it's fully readable, right, or readable. Then you have the fact that now I also need a marriage license when you go. While we were at this conference, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty went to go get her real ID in Ohio. She had to go back 4 times because she continued to miss something. This is a sitting Congresswoman who was told, okay, here's your birth certificate, we got that, but your last name doesn't match your birth certificate. We need your marriage license. She comes back with the marriage license. Then she had to, of course, petition from the county in which she got married to get a certified marriage license copy, right? Because she's like, I done moved 7 times, I don't know where I did that, right? That was a long time ago. She gets there, they say, oh, this marriage license has a different last name on it from the one that you have now. She said, well, shoot, I done forgot I was married first time, and this is the second marriage. She then had to go back and get the divorce decree and the other marriage license to then get her ID. That's the story she told us. She said, so 4 times a sitting congresswoman to get her real ID. So then when you think about passport access, so I proved my citizenship with passport access. Passport's another option for me to use to vote within the SAVE Act architecture. How many Americans have a passport? The turnaround for passports gets longer and longer, especially when you start dealing with the U.S. Postal Service. And I love them. They're a service. They're not a business. They're a service, right? So when you get to all of these pieces, then you go, how much was this poll tax? Whereas in the past, it may have been a nickel or a quarter or $1.50. Now you're looking at hundreds of dollars to gain a single form of ID to allow you to vote. And so that restricts access. When we create barriers to vote, people vote less likely. They're less likely to vote. Because they say, I don't have time to do all that. And so you see this legislation. Now what's crazy about it is that I get to Mitch McConnell's office and his aides are like, he adamantly opposes this. He did oppose it because he's a constitutional guy. He said it says that voting is in the hands of the states. This is the same man who also said I have all the power and so I refuse to appoint a Supreme Court justice even though there's a vacancy underneath the sitting president. So you can have 6 of one and half dozen of the other out of the same person's mouth. So when we're looking at the barriers for voting, not only is it, okay, who's eligible, but even we see in Kentucky, we have bipartisanship legislation that's trying to come out to automatically restore voting rights. Kentucky, one of the few states that does not automatically restore. You have citizens who have lost their right to vote for writing a bad check because it was considered a felony at the amount. And so it was what they call a victimless crime. Now I'm sure that rent payment didn't feel like it was victimless at that time. But from that perspective, that becomes a barrier for us to vote. So when we're looking at how, not only are we saying get people to the ballot, but making sure that we're educating people about what they need when they get to the ballot box. I personally show up every year with a different ID than my regular ID. I pick up one that's on the list, but don't nobody ever see. Because I want election workers to remember, you remember they had that training, you was there for 2 hours, and they had that 7 list of things, and you can't send that back to me and say, oh, that's not the right ID. Nah, baby, that's my global entry ID. It's a federal ID, it's covered, it qualifies. Because if they continue to just see that license, when somebody brings up their veterans card, their military ID, they go, oh, you can't use that. Well, no, baby, that's one of the ones in Kentucky. And so that's where we have to continually educate to make sure that people know when you show up, this is what you need. Here's the other part. In Kentucky, there's legislation where you can get an ID just to vote, and it's free. And you actually fill out an affidavit on the Department of Transportation's website to show up at any Department of Transportation office to get an ID just to vote. And you say it's because, hey, I ain't got the money for it, I ain't got all this other stuff, but I need an ID to vote. And so we have those caveats there, but people don't know it.
All right. Thank you for that, Roz. Does everybody who wanted to ask a question, have you gotten a note card out just in general to the panel, and whoever wants to answer it, or more people want to answer it, feel free. But as we're going to talk about like solutions now, or things that we can do, one of the things that is being talked about with, and I'll use the state of Tennessee as an example. Okay, so again, Calais comes down, Tennessee legislature goes into session. They decide to take the one African American district, Memphis, right, and split it up into 3 separate districts. Okay, but what that does, it also, I think Clark, I think you raised this point that some of the reddest, or some of the districts that we think are Republican aren't as red as the bluest of the blues are for us, right? Or for Democrats, because this is a nonpartisan organization. So what opportunities are there for us now? Like you state of Tennessee as an example. If African American turnout comes out at higher numbers, are there possibilities for us to take some of those seats that were red and flip them to blue?
Yes. So I'll go this real quick. In Jefferson County, we actually saw an increase in African American turnout for the primary this year. I would like to say because all 3 county-wide races have black people in them, right? So for the first time, you had a county attorney, you had a black man running. For sheriff, you had a black man running. For county clerk, you had a black woman running. For mayor, you had a black woman. And so, and two of the 4 of them came out to go to the general. So the reality of it is even in Jefferson County, there's no way to countywide offices without us, without our vote. All right. They have to show up here. Okay. The reality of it is, are you going to let them in and talk the good talk, or are you going to stand true to say, hey, this is what we need, and if you're not going to deliver that, then then I can't vote for you, because that's the only time you show up is when you need my vote. And so we have to stand firm within there to say, okay, this is where we're going to push, but we also have to get out and show up to turn it, because if we show up, we have it. We're a majority school district. The thought of us not having any black people on the school board is ludicrous, right? The attack on an African American superintendent is boggling for his first year. So those are the things that we have to stand up and say, okay, it doesn't go any further than here, but we got to bring everybody here. It can't be that 6 people in that 212 person.
Go ahead.
One of the things too that I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of when we talk about voting rights, a number of years ago, I guess prior to 2019, there had been an ongoing battle in the state legislature. Senator Neal, you were part of that. And a lot of times it was sponsored by that same Representative Jesse Crenshaw in Lexington. Restoration of voting rights. And for years and years, many of us were really fighting alongside them to get voting rights restored. Never did get the legislation passed. However, Governor Andy Beshear, as soon as he got in office, probably in the first week, I know it was in the first week, he signed an executive order restoring voting rights to about almost 200,000 Kentuckians that had been former felony offenders. Well, that was a great day, and many of us celebrated, but very few of those individuals, even today, 7 years later, know that their rights have been restored. And so one of the things that we have to do is we've got to really do a good job of educating around that more. I know in 2020 we did a lot of canvassing. We were telling folks about it. They were very excited through our People's Campaign efforts, but we've got to do more of that. There are about 30,000 or so of those folks that did not get their rights, that are now eligible to have their rights restored, are African American. So that's 30,000 potential voters sitting right there, that people in this room and beyond this room, we've got to start educating. You need to go on the state website. You need to look and see where you can get your rights, where your rights are restored, to check to make sure you fall in the category, because the vast majority of former felony offenders do.
Good information.
All right. Let me ask this question again. Like I said, we're talking about the various solutions to dealing kind of with not only the Voting Rights Act, but everything else that we're facing right now. Of course, when we're talking voter ID laws and things like that. So, Amber, I'm going to start with you. What should advocacy groups be doing right now in the face of the challenges that we're currently seeing?
Well, we talked about litigation earlier, and we talked about how litigation is difficult because of what's come out of the Supreme Court. But I do want to mention that, one of the, all of these different levels, Rosa was talking about all of these different barriers and the voting laws. Well, one thing that's happening up at this higher level is what has been going on with the federal government approaching states and requesting their voter rolls. And we have some states, like the state of Indiana, whose election officials turned all of that over to the federal government, and then it was only a reporter who, inquired about it before that information became known to the public, that their information had been turned over. That also has happened here in Kentucky, and the Secretary of State has been, reluctant to turn that information over. A lawsuit has been filed against the state for refusing to turn people's information over. We at the ACLU of Kentucky have intervened in that lawsuit. I know the county clerk here in Jefferson County has intervened in that lawsuit. But again, the attacks and intimidation, right? This is another form of intimidation, sort of the specter of the possibility that the federal government might want to build out a federal, database of voters, and what would they do with that information? What would they attempt to do with the rolls? So in terms of what I think people should do, I think a lot of this education information is so important. We at the ACLU at the last election cycle, we had never done any canvassing work here in Kentucky. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're not endorsing candidates. We started the Commonwealth Voter Campaign, and we had districts where we noticed, the Kentucky Safer Act, right? We knew that we had people who had gotten their voting rights restored in some of these districts who had leadership in Frankfort who were the people that were really beating the, Kentucky Safer Act. So we knew that there was a disconnect there, most likely between people in the district and what their leadership was doing. So we had a small canvassing team that did canvassing in 3 different districts, this sort of deep canvassing of having conversations with people. And Roz will probably know this information much better than I do, but there is data about, I think it's 7 touches, maybe 9 touches that if you have with people before an election, whether it's a conversation at the door, receiving a postcard, getting a phone call, that will lead to the person getting to the polls. And so, whatever, organization you might attach yourself to, whether you're canvassing with your church, whether you're writing postcards for one political party or another, I think that doing what each of us can to help contribute to those 7 to 9 pieces of touches to get people to the polls is what we should all be doing.
As I've thought about it, when I became president of the Louisville branch, one of my first and sole objectives was to see how we could pull together all of the various organizations in this community to address the problem. The answer to what needs to be done lies with whether we can get all of the various groups in the same room at the same time with a common plan, a common objective to get it done. We have been unable because, this group is here and they want to do their thing. Clark, Andy signed the restoration executive order, and that was because he got enough votes out of Jefferson County black community that put him in office. So we have the wherewithal to make a real difference if we come together and unite for a common purpose with a common goal. We can split up the work, but it takes us all working together and communicating on a regular basis. Not communicating when it's a crisis, but communicating on a day-to-day basis in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it, where we can do it. There are some things some organizations can do that others cannot do, but we can come together and make a real difference. I think for the NAACP, we've already started working on, at least the Louisville branch, a campaign around one directed at how we educate voters, how we register voters, and how we get them out to vote. Because I believe that if we can turn out numbers in Louisville and Jefferson County we may be able to change something major in terms of what's going to happen in Washington, D.C. But it takes us working together. And so it has to be a coordinated effort. And doesn't matter who's at head or at the top, it is a question of what's our sole objective and what we're working for.
Senator Neal, from the Kentucky General Assembly's perspective, what should be done there to help us preserve fair access and fair representation in terms of voting on the district, on the state, and on the local level?
How long do I have this mic?
We got 5 minutes.
I won't do that to you. Let me start here, because this is the key. The key is how we organize and come together. I think it's important for black folks to meet and come together and agree on certain things. I also think, and what I got out of that comment made by Raymond was, we need to get with other organizations where we can find agreement with certain things. And I will suggest to you that not just these organizations like the League of Women Voters, the great work that they do, or the ACLU, the great work that they have done historically, but there are many levels of individuals that are leading in the community. Some of them only have 5 people in them. Do you hear what I'm saying? Because if those folks are empowered, if they are connected, if they agree and understand their role, that makes everything powerful. So this is about organization. It's about meeting people where they are. This is about communicating effectively, not using these highfalutin words and etc. I mean, we got to talk in plain talk, and we have to lay out objectives, which gets back to this whole question that you have to meet and communicate and decide strategically and collectively what you agree upon. I tell you one thing I've done. I've traveled many places around the world, and I have found out one thing is for sure. Everywhere I go, people want the same thing. But when you put it in a political context, people get into team play. Even when University of Louisville does something wrong, you for your team. You're going to fight for your team.
That's right.
As long as you can't break into that where people meet people where they are, you've heard that generalization. It's going to be very difficult to break this up. Now, what was your question?
You answered it, and I tell you what I'm going to do.
Let me do one thing. Let me do something specific for Jim. I think I'll make this quick. I pulled out a little stuff earlier today. And this is based upon laws that we already have in Kentucky. We're talking Kentucky here. So, we have some people have access to what they call no excuse early voting. Guess what? 3 days of no excuse early voting is all we got. We should have 2 weeks. In fact, we had more than this during, remember they restricted that. This is a restriction. Actually, it's a compromise within the Republican Party to get to that. I'll give the Secretary of State a nod. We're respected. I'm not even being critical. Well, a little bit. Secondly, excused absentee voting remains available for voters who are elderly, disabled, and so forth, okay? We have to expand that. We have to expand that so that folks can take advantage of these things that are available. Online voter registration is very important. We have to make sure that we take the restrictions off of the online voter registration. I'm talking about specific things. Kentucky voter registration deadline of 29 days before an election, we need to expand that. 29 days isn't enough. We need more than that. The Commonwealth has expanded the use of voter centers and county election centers. We have to take in consideration that there's some people can't get to these centers. We need to deal with the logistics that take place as it relates to a redistricting or district, I won't just say redistricting, but where you find voters and what it takes for them to do that. Because people, keep in mind, people are busy living from day to day, struggling from day to day, getting their kids out to school, fighting off the bill guy. You know, they're not, what's this? And who are those people over there doing these things for themselves anyway? And look at Trump. He's enriching himself. I know a few people down the street enriching themselves. There's a lot of distrust in the system. Kentucky elections are administered by local election officials, and this is a good thing. These are things we can address. Give me just 2 more minutes and I'll be through. I might not even talk the rest of the night. So, be quiet. So we need to expand no excuse absentee voting. We need to adopt automatic voter registration. In other words, you go to a state agency or something, you get it right there, bam. Allow same-day voter registration. Look, we've upgraded the system. Like we can't do same-day voter registration. That's ridiculous. This is a restriction. Expand the early voting period beyond the current 3 days. I mentioned that. Simplify and codify the process of restoring voting rights. Guess what happens when this governor leaves and the next team comes in? That's done by an executive order. That means they can rescind all of that stuff. They can go somewhere else with that. And he's getting ready to go. Yeah. Okay, increase the number of accessible polling places and vote centers in underserved communities. Simple. And strengthen voter education. Yeah. Voter education should be at the tip of everything that you do and every touch that you make. There should be a pathway articulated for that individual or that group of individuals to find themselves at the poll. Last thing, I made a statement earlier about those 4 precincts, and we couldn't change the voting, but I didn't tell you this. I came back and it really depressed me. It really hurt me, really. Wow, what's the way out? And then I realized, wow, we got to think more long term, not just right now, but long term. We got to be urgent about right now. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. My son and daughter, my son lives in New York now. My son and daughter call me, don't even know who they're going to vote for. Give me some information. Why? Because they got to vote. And you know why that's the case? Because I took them to the poll at 6 a.m. before I took them to school. They have bought into this. We need to have different strategies for getting people to own the voting process. Yeah. And I'm done.
Very good.
The county clerk's office in every county in the state are always like, we need more polling locations. Because people pull out, we need more polling locations. In 2021, we didn't have an election, but the Board of Elections meeting, we were talking about the fact that we had these vote centers from 2020, and we wanted to expand that piece. And I've been an active participant at Board of Elections meetings for about the last 6 years. And one of the things we talked about, they said, well, Roz, we don't have a lot of places who would be voting locations. And I was like, what about the black church? There's plenty of black churches. So I want to give a shout out to New Zion and Reverend Ocker for being an early vote center location. The county clerk's office was like, what black church? I was like, so ma'am, you want a list of them? I got a whole list of black churches that you can go to. But the reality of it is that we have institutions that are trusted in communities that are able. And a lot of times, these county clerk's offices across the state are paying a fee, whatever that fee is, to use your facility for that, whether it's early voting or for its election day, to make it accessible, to make it closer to you, to allow for that opportunity, because we need it to be in trusted areas. But a lot of times that means we have to also open our doors of our organization and say, come on in here. And guess what? They ain't reaching out to you. So you may have to call them and say, hey, put my name on the list if you're looking for a polling location in precinct 114. I'm available if somebody pulls out.
I just wanted to add really briefly, just to underline what you all were saying about, about coming together and about the long-term nature of this work. And I think, trust, really, right? Trust is at the center of that. This is an inside-outside game. Senator Neal, as you're reading through this list of these things that need to happen in the legislature, you need support, right? You're in a super duper minority within the chamber that that you're in, right? You need support. You need people calling the legislative message line, and so that those slips are being generated saying that people don't support this or don't support that. You know, we have to take away the talking point from our opponents of I don't hear from anybody. Nobody cares. No one called. No one said anything. Our voice is our power, but I think that when we think about coming together, you know, Dr. Burse was saying it doesn't matter who is in charge. We are going to have to move in deep trust. We're going to have to understand, hey, you know, Senator Neal's going to have some conversations with different people, and just because he had a conversation with one of his colleagues on the other side, that doesn't mean that he doesn't care about us or the issue, right? We have to be able to trust, you know, people in the faith community, all of these folks working within their lanes, that yes, folks are going to go out and do and have the conversations that they need to have, but they're going to move with the values that we agree upon. And then let's come together around this strategy. But I think that there's so much distrust and competition that is what is keeping a lot of the collective work from happening.
Field a little bit and start incorporating some of the questions that I've gotten from the audience along those lines of working together. Can somebody kind of share, or whoever wants to kind of share with their thoughts on this? What are some of the suggestions, or what do we want to get from our white brothers and sisters who are allied with us in the fight for voting rights and making sure that we don't go backward? What would we want to see from them in terms of their active engagement, etc.?
I'm becoming a cynic. And a cynic is that a lot of those folks who claim to be allies in the current environment are not standing up and saying enough is enough. So what I want from our allies is I want them to stand up and say what you're doing is absolutely wrong, and communicate that publicly. You know, in our small rooms, pull your side, yeah, I'm with you. But when it comes to the public with you, they're not there. We need that, and we need it badly. Because if you're truly with me, you'll be with me in the good times and the bad times. And if they're trying to roll the clock back, you know they're rolling the clock back, and you got to speak.
That's it. It's imperative for those who are true allies to listen and support. I've been in a number of rooms where on the surface level we agreed, we talked about strategies and programming and messaging, we agreed, but then when it was time to actually do the work, for some reason I didn't get invited to the meeting. And when we started talking about the funding that was needed and how we were going to divvy out our workforce, our volunteerism, when it gets to that point, for some reason the listening stops. And it's not that it goes one way. We listen all the time. We're experts at listening because we don't have a choice. But at the same time, we need folks to listen and then support the work that we're doing. Oftentimes that's actually volunteering, and sometimes when you're thinking about what you're going to support financially, if it's $25 or $100 or $1,000, whatever it is, look at some of these avenues that you have available to you that happen to be black-led or happen to be led by someone that does not look like you.
Anyone else? All right. Let me ask this question, and I think Amber, this may be a question for you. Is that the question was, can there be a novel argument made that redistricting maps have a disparate impact on African Americans' ability to select its representatives?
And I don't know. Yes, I mean I think the answer to that is yes. And in speaking about again like the different ways to go at this at the different levels, I do think that is one of the strategies.
But that is section 2. Is what you're asking. That's what got thrown out.
No, what I was saying was she just described it to the question. That is section 2, and that's what got thrown out. And I said it went one step further. In Alabama, a district court judge held a hearing, gathered evidence that showed that the legislature intentionally drew districts to exclude the opportunity for black folks. The record is replete with that. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court recently, I guess last week, and the Supreme Court said, fine, use your maps anyway, Alabama.
And let's talk about that for just a second. When we're talking about intent, of course, we got 5 lawyers up here. Talk about what in the legal sense, what is meant by intent? Because I think a lot of times people are saying, like, you're not going to hear. Well, I would hope I would not hear, or maybe I want to hear them say, we are drawing this map because we don't care about those black folks. But what does it look? What does intent look like?
What do you mean by intent? That means what you intend to do. But think about that. Think about how you find it. Only thing you got to do is find another plausible basis for your actions, and it nullifies intent. And you can almost, like I said earlier before, they have mastered that, where they used to do this stuff in your face with dogs and batons and water hoses. They got into this neutral language and all this other stuff. These constructs that they have could easily circumvent that intent question. It's very difficult in a sophisticated framework to identify and prove intent.
One of the methods you use to prove intent, and Amber talked about, is disparate impact. If you can show what is actually done or proposed to be done will have a negative or bad effect on a particular group, disparate impact. One of the things Trump immediately said in one of his first statements after he was, once he was sworn in, is, I want the Justice Department to do away with this disparate impact analysis in everything. Because that's one of the methodologies that is used to do that. In the Alabama case, where the judge found that they had intentionally, the facts were laid out, so it was clear that that was the case. Then we jumped to North Carolina, and remember that they in the North Carolina case, they said that the legislature with racial precision had drawn the district lines so as to disenfranchise black voters to be able to choose. So all of those bases for which that we've done it are now under attack. When I was in law school, one of the things that we used to always be taught is you have to come up with a strategy. You can't come up with a strategy that will give you always the win to begin with. You chip away in it. If you look at the history of the Brown versus Board of Education case, it didn't happen all in 1954. It happened over a period of about 10 years. And so you have to, in fact, be prepared to do that, knowing that it's going to take some time to be able to do that. And while we're talking about Brown Board of Education, understand also that the man named Clarence Thomas, in some dissenting opinions, has advocated for the overturning of Brown versus Board of Education. Well, I think a woman has messed him up, but anyway, it's there. So what we're seeing today may be just the tip of the iceberg, which means that we've got to be prepared to respond. And the one weapon that we have, that we still have, in spite of everything that they've done, the one weapon we have is our vote.
So let's lawyer just a little bit here. Now, fight back. As I read Calais, they have said racial gerrymandering is unconstitutional. But they also said that they have no jurisdiction over the political framework on the state level to judge what they do in terms of redistricting at the same time. So they took away the basis of the Civil Rights Act, which is based upon that disparate treatment of the whole piece in terms of that piece. They ruled out racial gerrymandering without killing the underlying premise, and then took their hands off and opened the door for partisan gerrymandering without any pushback. Go ahead.
And I'm going to respond to that because one of the things that is still out there, the 14th Amendment is still on the books.
Amen.
And if you read Justice Ketanji Jackson's dissent in the North Carolina case, she makes the argument, but she comes all the way up to the line and she stops. And she gone one step further to say that the 14th Amendment authorizes remedies where you find violations occurred to be able to do some things. So there is, Amber, a potential door open. It may be a small one, maybe a crack, but it's there. The 14th Amendment wasn't passed to enfranchise white authorities and whites. Historical, the Federalist Society they're big on studying history. If they study the history of what took place at the time the 14th Amendment was in fact passed, that history should tell you something else about what you can use the 14th Amendment for. But again, our 6 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court have said at this point that no longer matters because the 14th Amendment says equal protection, and equal protection means equal protection for everybody. Even if you have been intentionally discriminated against in certain ways.
And therefore, intent is very difficult to improve. Plus, you have those same 6 on the Supreme Court. This is going to be a long battle, but it's going to be a good battle.
Very good. Real quick practical application on intent. We have seen since those rulings what the true intent is.
Yes, we have.
The intent is to take away rights. The intent is to discriminate. And we do not have, as we've already implied, but we should explicitly say, we don't have a legitimate Supreme Court of the United States. And so we've got to do all of this work. And if you think back historically, that's a monumental thing to say. Because historically, no matter how bad it was, that was really kind of a stopgap, a place where it would stop there. At least the Supreme Court would show some degree of reasonableness, legitimacy, and application of the law. The Supreme Court doesn't even really truly apply the law the way any of us were taught to apply it in law school.
So let me do this. I'm gonna get us to a point to close us out and ask each of you to answer this question. If you could leave this room, panelists, if you could leave this room, the audience here today, one message about the future of voting rights in America, what would it be? Take it in any order, whoever wants to go first. If you could leave this room with one message about the future of voting rights in America, what would it be?
The age-old saying is, if you don't use it, you lose it, is exactly what we're seeing. The lack of use of voting power is what we're seeing being rolled out because they know the power that's there, but we haven't been using it. And I think all of our calls is we have to get people to vote. We have to inspire them to show up, to use their power. The same power that they have to pull a trigger on a 14-year-old in the middle of a school backyard is the same power they have at the ballot box. And we need them to use that power in that way to shape our communities. And that's how we have to empower every generation. But we also have to make sure that we're teaching and training that generation what was at stake and what is at stake. Because the reality of it is people live through the struggle, and that's why they will never miss a time to vote. And the other age-old thing that I'll say is that hard times make soft people, right? And so, hard times make strong people, and easy times make soft people. And so sometimes you may have had it a little too easy, right? And so sometimes it takes a hard head and a hard behind to get you where you need to be. And that's what we're seeing. And so we need to show up and get everybody else to show up with us.
We, actually human beings, are resilient people. If you look at us historically, think about what we did to get to pre-Calais. Think about that for a moment. Think how long it took to do that. That didn't just happen in what you call the civil rights movement. That was a struggle that goes all the way back. We got to do our part. It's about doing our part. I am an optimist. I'm a perennial optimist. I don't know how not to be an optimist. I think we can do anything that we come together and decide to do, because I do believe there is right. And we have to believe in it and never give up and fight the good fight.
You know, our national organization 2 weeks ago called on all African American athletes to not attend SEC schools. It was a hell of a call. But the reality of it is, if people actualize it, it could change. Most of these young athletes have never heard of John Carlos or Tommy Smith or Harriet. The rewards they're reaping today is because of the sacrifices that those three individuals made. And so we've got to be able, it may not, things happen incrementally. It doesn't happen in all one fell swoop. If every one of those black athletes decided they wasn't going to the University of Alabama, they could change Alabama. By the same token, here in Louisville, folks, and I'm going to go preaching and messing, the University of Louisville terminated its relationship with the Yearling Club. Terminated its relationship because of the legislation doesn't allow for the things that we do. The reality of it is, they need to hear from us that we expect them to come back and be involved in this organization to do that. And I say that because those of you who were around in 1992 when University of Louisville went to the Fiesta Bowl and won it, and because the community was in an uproar, money that came back, they put it in an endowment called the Porter Scholarships. This coming fall, less than 25% of the students who are going to get the Porter Scholarship look like us. We got to speak and talk.
I haven't heard a lot of amens, but I still have heard a lot of agreement in this dialogue today. And it's imperative that we don't just agree in this space, but that we carry this forward into every space we possibly can. So one of the things that's been talked about is how we organize. And Senator Neal and I, every time we see each other, we talk about this. I live in Lexington. I lived in Louisville about 7 years. Graduated from University of Louisville, Brandeis School, all of that. But one of the things that's really missed oftentimes is how similar Lexington and Louisville really are. The same issues that Jefferson County schools are having are very similar and are dealing with most of the same things that the state legislature with Fayette County schools. Lexington, many years ago, merged before Louisville did. And it did it at a time when there was a gentleman by the name of Harry Sykes. Almost won the mayor's office in Lexington. In the last election, before they merged the government, a black man lost the mayoral election by about 2%. And then they merged because it was more efficient, it was more this and it was more that. Now, Lexington and Louisville are very much alike, which means what? Also, nonpartisan elections. We've been doing them since the early 70s. What it does is it makes people really have to grapple with the issues and figure out what they really believe versus just seeing a D and an R and a cheat sheet based on those letters by someone's name. We have all of these kind of common issues. Even in the legislature this time, there was a law passed that only applied to school board members in Jefferson and Fayette County. Those are the only counties in the state where you no longer can be on the school board and work in another school district outside of that school district. But they only passed it for Fayette and Jefferson. Most of the things we're dealing with are almost exactly the same, which means what? we have to intentionally start working together more. And part of that is what I talked about earlier. We could all do in Lexington and Louisville, these adopt a precinct things that I was talking about earlier. And then the other thing would be that just like we met tonight, this cannot be the last meeting. The next one though has to be around how we organize some things and how we actually move out beyond where we currently are.
I'll just say briefly, you know, I was on Linden and the Urban League have this new Power Shift podcast, which is just short, little 10-minute bites. And it's on social media, they stream it. But we were talking this morning about how democracy is not a spectator sport, right? We cannot rest and think, oh, it's always been this way. Oh, we've always had, you know, there's so many things. We've always had these rights. They can never be taken away, right? There's so many things that have happened, right? These rollbacks that have happened. So we can't look to our left and right and say, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? We have to look here, right? And say, what are we going to do? And I think about, you know, as all these folks have talked about, I think about what John Lewis always said about this work, right? There is the urgency of now, but this work is a marathon that extends beyond any of our lifetimes. And so what are we going to do now for our leg of the race under the conditions that we have been given to carry the baton forward?
I'll do a plug. On July the 11th at 9 a.m. at St. Stephen Baptist Church, the Louisville branch NAACP, Simmons College of Kentucky, and St. Stephen Baptist Church are holding a statewide conference called the State of Black Kentucky. We're inviting folks from across the state to come. We will be talking about education, health, economic development. Very good. And then a panel that's going to deal with what we call white Christian nationalism, which is driving a lot of what is taking place. So July the 11th, 9 a.m. at St. Stephen's. We invite all of you to attend and bring your friends and all those. And in addition to it, there will be a couple of panels of young folks between 16 and 30, who are going to tell us what they think we ought to be doing.
Amen.
9 to 4:30.
All right. Okay. We have covered, I've gone through everybody's questions that they submitted up here. At one point or the other, they've been answered in different forms or fashions. We weaved them in as we were talking. Are there any more questions?
Well, there are many other organizations, Kentucky Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. We have some strong political activists in this city that have not been heard. And of course, we're going to follow your lead in many ways because you are the experts and we respect you. But we've got to do it. I think you talked about that earlier, Gerald, that we've got to do things differently. This is a different time. We have social media. We've got artificial intelligence. We can't do things just the old way, pick up the telephone and just call somebody. We've got to go way beyond that. And so I appreciate you, Dr. Burse. I appreciate everybody, all the panelists tonight. And my prayer is that we will come together as a collective. If we do that, we may even elect the first black mayor of Louisville, Kentucky. That's what I'm talking about. Because the current mayor we have, I don't know about him. I'm not going to say anything negative.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, last question, please.
Thank you. You know, we've heard wonderful ideas.
But where is the plan? When is this going to happen? Where is it going to happen? And who's going to be invited? And who's going to write this script where we take it around to canvas? So we're talking on the same page. You know, it's wonderful to have ideas, and then we walk out of here, and what happens?
Go back to the same.
Yeah, we can't do that. If we're gonna, we ought to set a date today. I don't know among the organizers here, who are the powerhouses? You know, everybody's here for a reason.
We're ready to work.
Okay, so what? So where is that going to happen? Who's going to decide, okay, we're meeting on July or whatever else at this place, and you come from your organization and you commit to what precinct are are you going to take? And who's writing the script? So that when we go door to door, we're saying the same thing. We're tackling people, we're making voting easier so that people don't stay home because they don't want to look like idiots because they don't know what's going on because it's so hard to figure out what's going on.
Right.
So where's the plan?
And I appreciate, thank you so much. I appreciate that comment. You're right on time. It has been reiterated a number of times by members of the panel up here that this is the first step and that there will be a reconvening. I would suggest, and again, me taking my moderator privilege, that on July the 11th,
That's right.
the state of Black Kentucky, as it relates to my job in terms of moderating this discussion, that we're not closing the doors of the house here. We want everybody to continue to convene and discuss and let that conversation continue on. But we want to take this opportunity to again thank our panelists for being here and sharing with us. I think we've had some lively discussion, got some good information. I also want to thank the Black Women for Political Education and the Yearlings Club for coming together and putting this program on.
To this panel, thank you for everyone being here. Thank you. Now, I think somebody over here said that there was a lot of agreement in the room, and I'm going to be honest. I've sat in this room tonight and I've been very frustrated. Right. And I told the group, I'm the youngest in the group, am I not? And I told the group, I said, y'all, I'm tired. Tired. I was born in 1961. I got some stories to tell you of how I've been treated. And this is a black issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's a black issue. All right. All right. They coming for us. All right. And we're in a war. That's right. I don't know if you noticed it or not. You're in the war. And the fight is on. They trying to take us out, choke us out, take our life, our joy, hopes, and dreams. All right. Constantly, I have a conversation in the barber shop with these young fellas saying, look, y'all, I'm getting ready to retire, but y'all need to get y'allself together because y'all on y'all's way to the plantation. All right. And my question is, okay, we need to organize, but here's the question. Are we going to fight? No. Because guess what? In a fight, somebody going to get hurt, some lives are going to be destroyed, somebody even has to die. So the question is, are we ready to fight? What did Frederick Douglass say? Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, it never will. But here's what else you got to add to that. If you make a demand, there must be some consequences. Right. Speak. So we're gonna get together. What we gonna do? Get together and have another kumbaya moment? So we got a young lady in here, 36. Is she the youngest one in here? We got this little fella. Somebody brought the little fella in. Where are the young people? So when we talk about getting out to vote, are we taking our young people to the polls? Right. Let me give you a personal story. I'm about to wrap up because I got to calm down. I got two sons. We got physical over voting. All right. Y'all gonna vote if you're not gonna live here. That's it. So we keep being passive. And while we're being passive, they're passing laws and taking everything away from us. So we're gonna keep talking, or we're gonna fight. So they've offered the first gathering July the 11th. Let's come together. But after that, I mean, we can ask St. Stephen's for a room, that we get in that room, put a calendar together, begin to start planning to fight. Y'all, this ain't gonna be no sweet thing. All right. It's not gonna be an easy thing. All right. And so I hope everybody signed up on the list so they can reach out to you and say, hey, join us in the fight. Listen to me. Has anybody ever been in a fight? Yeah. Last time I was in a fight, I was a student at Morris Brown University. Okay. And I was older than most of the other students, and the young boy hit me in my mouth so bad and messed me up. And I realized then, I said, I don't need to fight like that no more. But guess what? This is a life and death matter. Either we're going to fight, or either we're going to let them have what they want and just say, here, take it. But here's what you must realize. it's your children who gonna pay the price.
That's right.
I'm gonna say it again, because maybe some of y'all didn't hear me. It's your children, when you go home, you look at your grandchildren, your children, they gonna suffer as a result of what's happening. Most of you all getting Social Security checks and all that, you know, y'all vacationing and living good and house paid off.
Yeah.
They may not even be able to get a house.
All right, all right.
What we gonna do? We're gonna keep being passive, so we're gonna fight. And if you ain't gonna fight, this ain't the group to be with. Because I'm the youngest one of the group, and I told them, I said, y'all sure y'all want me to follow this up? Because I'm not coming sweet, y'all. Enough is enough. I'm sick and tired. And it's time for us to be sick and tired of going through what we've been through. Because I don't know if you realize it or not, but a lot of this is just like it was when I was born. It's the same thing. The question is, are we going to fight? Mr. Tandy?